Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts. Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. Can't take it away. Can't take it away. Can't take my joy. Can't take my peace. Can't take my love. Can't take my faith. Can't take it away. Can't take it away. Can't take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie Bland. You know, all that hugging kind of messed up my boutonniere a little bit. So. And by the way, we've had these for all men today, so even if you don't consider yourself a father, please take one on the way out. We have them for you, so it's just a beautiful way of just honoring. You know, we talk about in Unity, I've been saying it for, well, I didn't invent it, but I've been talking about it a lot, that we honor the divine masculine and the divine feminine. You know, sometimes people tell me that the first time they ever heard of Father, Mother God was when they came to a Unity church. We know that God is beyond gender. But these two interwoven polarities of energy are really powerful for us to work with. And today, on Father's Day, we want to extend that recognition and honoring to all of the men in our church. And we just thank you so much for showing up today, and thank you for being on the planet as who you are. Do y'all like St. Peter jokes? I like those. I think they're great. I don't know exactly whose theology they come from, but that's okay. So a man arrives at the gates of heaven, and St. Peter is there to welcome him, and he said, "Would you like a tour?" And the guy says, "Sure, I'll take a tour." So St. Peter starts showing him around, and he says, "This is the Methodist area. And over here we have the Presbyterian area. And here is the Muslim area, and here is the Jewish area, and here is the Buddhist area. They're only here for a little while, and then they go back. And here is the Hindu area." And then he noticed that there was this great walled area of heaven. And the guy says, "St. Pete, who's over there?" And he said, "Oh, shh, that's the fundamentalists. They don't think anybody else is here." And fundamentalists, they grow in every religion. It's not just Christian fundamentalists. There's a spectrum of belief, and I would put on one end the fundamentalist, on the other end the mystic. And on the fundamentalist area, it's where we become more and more exclusionary. We follow the rules. We become so clear that we have the right answer. And so in all of the world's faith traditions, there are fundamentalists who believe that they've got it all figured out, and if you're not doing it exactly what they said you to do it, then you're not going to St. Peter's heaven. I'll just say that. And those occur in all religious life, in all religion practices. I mean, not all practices, but in all faith traditions. You know what I'm saying? On the other end, as we become more in the mystical awareness of God's presence and love, on this end, I was going to say, all the guys over there, none of them agree with each other. They just don't. But on the mystical end, they all do agree. Because from all faiths, they understand that the presence of God can best be described as love. And that our purpose is to be the receiver and the giver of this love because we are one with it. And in the Islamic tradition, in the Hindu tradition, in the Christian tradition, all of these faiths agree that this is the nature of reality. In Unity, we are Christian, but we tend to more of a mystical Christianity. So we don't exclude. We don't teach that there are some people that get it and are reconciled to God's loves and others that aren't. That's not what we teach. We teach that God's love is present everywhere in all people. And I know for many people, when they got to Unity, they said, "I didn't know there was a church that believed what I've always believed." And that may or may not be your experience today, but I invite you to open your heart to that. I'm going to share today a story from Christian Scripture, and Somebody was asking me, well, I told you last week, some people think I'm doing too much Bible, some people think I'm not doing enough, but I'm bringing what's in my heart, what feels right. But why, if we are this evolutionary teaching, why are we going back to these old stories again and again? Well, got a way I'd like to look at it. My friend, Reverend Chris Terry, described 3 relationships we can have with Scripture. And this could be true for all Scripture of all faiths. The first is what we would call fundamentalism, literalism, where we really believe that we've got the book with the rules and the facts, and this is how it is, and you need to follow it just the way we say. That's one way of looking at the Bible, as though it was literally handwritten with absolute 100% factual information. So the universe was created in 7 days, 24-hour periods, and you can see that you can get really far down a rabbit hole with that. But that is one relationship you can have with the Bible, where you look at it as the absolute factual message, lines, words from God. The next relationship that we can have with it is what Chris calls the deconstructionist scholarly approach, where we can begin to question some of that. I don't know if you knew this, but Jesus didn't speak English. Did you know that? So when a preacher stands on the stage and says, well, Jesus says, he didn't. Not in those words. And so what the scholars seek to do is find out what were the original, also the original manuscripts of Jesus' teachings were also written in a language that Jesus didn't speak. Greek was the lingua franca. It was the language that everyone used for reading and writing in that day. And so all of those stories that were handed down around Jesus and his teachings and his sayings, they were put from Aramaic, which is the language he would have spoken, into Greek, into English over 2,000 years. There may have been a mistaken interpretation somewhere along the line, just saying. But it's really useful information, because then we can begin to look underneath the surface of what we believe that the Bible is saying to understand a different context. What would the ancient peoples have heard in these languages? So somebody mentioned Rocco Errico. He's a wonderful Aramaic scholar who's spoken here at Unity before. Did you know, for instance, that the word for sin in Aramaic is an archery term? It simply means not a bullseye. Doesn't that feel different than the way we've come to understand that word? Like we have really sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, like we're terrible people, when actually what it's really intended to mean is just didn't quite hit it this time. That's just an example that this second relationship, the scholarly and deconstructionist relationship, can give us. But the third relationship with Scripture is where I really like to go. It's what Chris calls re-enchanting the myth. It's what we might call metaphysical Bible interpretation and unity, where we seek to go beneath the surface and find layers of rich meaning that are aliveness for us, where there's some really hard to describe or to quantify aliveness that was in those words, then it's stayed true throughout the centuries, and it still ignites me today. That's what we're talking about, that there were people thousands of years ago who were asking the same sorts of questions and pondering the same sorts of ideas that we are today, and this is the inspiration that came through them. And we can connect to it for freedom and for healing and for transformation. All right, that's all my disclaimer. Are you ready for a story? This story I'm going to share with you today, I know for sure it didn't happen because Jesus made it up. He would make up stories a lot. They were called what? Yeah, you all know, you're some Bible scholars. Parables. This is not meant to be a true story, but it's a teaching story. And there was a man who had 2 sons. And one day, the younger of his 2 sons came to him and said, "Pop, you're doing really good. You got a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of wealth, a lot of abundance. I would like to receive my inheritance now." And the father said, "Cool with me. That's fine." So he divided his estate in half and gave half to the younger son. The younger son took his wealth, and it says that he went to a far-off land and had a good time. Wine, women, and song. A friend of mine in AA in Dallas, she said it was similar for her, except it was men, whiskey, and Neiman Marcus. Good times. Using the wealth of his father to explore the pleasures of planet Earth. And did he do some exploring? And then the money ran out. And the story comes down to us that a famine hit the land and his need became great. We're going to get into the metaphysics of that in a minute. I'm going to just tell you a story for right now. So in the next part of the story, it says that he became employed. He hired himself out to a landowner in this foreign land. And the only opportunity for him was to feed the swine in the fields. And he was so hungry and so desperate that he longed to eat the pods that he was feeding the pigs. Do you have any idea what that would have meant to a lawful Jewish man in Jesus' time? That is as low can go, because pigs were considered unclean animals. You couldn't be near them, you couldn't touch them, much less eat that delicious bacon. You can't do it. And so for Jesus to say that this wealthy young man had squandered his inheritance to the point where he wants to eat with the pigs, hard times like we can't even really imagine. And then something happened. In the King James Version, it says this: he came to himself. A moment of awakening, a quickening of realization that there's something ain't right with this pig situation. And he said, even in my Father's household, the servants have it better than this. An idea for maybe my way of doing things are not working so well in my behalf. Perhaps I should open myself to a different idea. Maybe I could go home. And not asked to be reinstated as a son and an heir, but just to be a servant. And I love this next part of the story. It says, and he turned for home. And while he was yet a long way off, his father saw him, ran to him, put his arms around him, kissed him on the neck, and ordered the servants to bring the finest robe and put it upon him, to put shoes upon his feet and put a ring upon his hand. He ordered that the fatted calf be killed and a feast, a celebration be given, that this son who was lost was returned. Not quite the end of the story, though. The other brother, do you remember him? Says he was out in the fields working and he noticed something going on up at the big house. And he asked the servants, "What's up?" They said, "Your brother is back. And your father has ordered the fatted calf be killed, and we're having a great celebration that your brother has returned." To which he goes, "Great, I'll be right there." No, that's not what he said. No, you guys are good. He went to his father, and with great pain and resentment, he said, "Why? Why would you honor this brother of mine who has so dishonored you? Why would you do that when you've never even given a small goat for me and my friends?" And then I love what his father says. "My son, everything I have is yours. You only need ask." Isn't it a great story? How many hundreds of thousands of millions of times has this story been told in gatherings just like us today, where people who have an intention towards spiritual growth, and we're here seeking to learn something, and we listen to these words and these characters and these plot points, and something in us opens up. You see, when we teach by story, as Jesus so beautifully did, we have a different listening than if we teach by just giving you spiritual principle and here's the application. The head will take that and work with it. But it's the heart. Because we can feel ourselves, even though we haven't wanted to eat the pig slop, we've been in hard times in our lives. Even though we may have not have dishonored our Father in our home, we've had that moment of realizing, I can't keep doing it like this. I've got to find a different way. So we put ourselves in this story. And this story is so perfect for Father's Day. Reverend Karen Russo was here last fall. She taught us a workshop and spoke on a Sunday morning, and she was teaching on prosperity in her Money Keys work. But she teaches a lot from this idea of masculine and feminine energy. And in her work, she describes feminine energy as being about awareness and gratitude and communion, connection. It's this very inclusive and welcoming energy. But the divine masculine is signified, or it's expressed as intention, choice, and action. And for Father's Day, how perfect that we get to be with this story, because Jesus, the master teacher, was showing us so clearly the power of our choice for how we live. We can choose to live beneath the Father's protection and receive the blessings of the Father fully, or we can choose to separate ourselves and be with the pigs. Who made the Son have these experiences? Who forced him to do anything in this story? The whole story is brought to our attention to show us that we choose our experience of life. Now, there are some in even metaphysical traditions who would say that even our choice is illusion, because we cannot choose to actually separate ourselves from God. It is only our thought of separation. But our experience comes from what? Our thoughts. So the truth, I would say it's a yes, yes. It's a both and. That it is true that we can't actually choose to separate ourselves from God, but we can certainly choose an experience that feels like we are separate from God. That's what this story teaches us today. So there are three parts of the story I want to explore with you for just a moment. The leaving home. I was looking for, like I said, I've been doing quite a bit of Bible lately, and some of you are ready for something else. And so I had I'd explored other faith traditions and other mythological traditions. You know, there's a lot of killing of fathers in some traditions. I don't know if you know that, but I was looking at the Greek traditions, and oh my goodness. Even in the Hindu tradition, I love the god Ganesh, this wonderful, generous spirit, that depiction of God's goodness and grace, the remover of obstacles. And I always wondered how he got that elephant on his head. Do you know that story? His dad cut his head off and put an elephant there. I mean, really strange stories about fathers and sons. But I realized something too. I mean, really in all these traditions and in literature, you'll see there's this conflict between father and son. It is part of the masculine path to break out of the home and to find your own way. And so leaving home is a necessary part of our journey. Eckhart Tolle says that everyone's spiritual path, the universal spiritual path, is just like that of the prodigal. It goes from unconscious oneness through apparent separation to conscious oneness. We leave home. We think we're alone, we're separate, and then something in us awakens. We come to ourselves, and we return with an awareness of the union that we share with God. So this young man must leave home. Something in him impelled him to discover life. And so he took his inheritance. And then he says he went to a foreign land. This represents for us when we separate from our home and we seek to find our good in earthly sources. But there are no earthly sources. There are only channels. There's only one source. And when you've separated yourself consciously from your source, you will end up, just as he did, depleted and bankrupt. It will not work. It will not satisfy your soul. There's the great poem from Hafiz, or the translation by Daniel Ludinsky. He says, "The toys of this world bring you no joy." Remove all of the mine, the acquisitive nature, all of the desire to own experience in life. It will never satisfy you. But we have to try. And so we separate ourselves out and we try and go to this place where we think we know what we're doing, and we always end up depleted with whatever our equivalent of slopping the pigs. You know, I had a thought about this. I've shared a lot of my addiction recovery story. Don't need to go into that too deeply, but there's a saying that bottom is wherever you stop digging. You know, say, are you going to hit rock bottom? Well, bottom is wherever you stop digging the hole. I thought about this. What if the son had just, squandered half of his inheritance? Like, thought, this doesn't feel so good. I'm going to go home. Would that have worked? Maybe. But it appears to me, in my experience, that it is both. Sometimes we can come to the awakening of ourselves a little sooner, and sometimes, no, we have to go down to the pigs, where we get in so much pain and in so much pain that none of our ideas are working, and we must turn towards home. And the second point I want to talk about in this story is the coming to ourselves. At any moment in our spiritual journey, we can realize that we have left home, that we're no longer functioning in an awareness and embodied knowing of God's presence and action working through our lives. That's not where we are. We're in our will. We're in our ego. At any moment, we can come awake. Stop it. That thing you're doing that's causing you pain for yourself and others, quit doing it. Remember who you are. You were never meant to be slopping the pigs. It's not who you are. And so we come to an awareness, come to ourselves. And I think it's interesting, too, in the story that even after having his moment of awakening, he said, maybe I could be a servant. And some of us will find proof in religious practices or in ideas that I'm still nothing but a sinner saved by grace. We will still find ways to keep ourselves small even when we're trying to stay home with the Father. And so here's my favorite part of the story. Oh, before we get there, when he comes home, just tell me now, who was it that wasn't so happy when the prodigal returned home? You would think so, but I think it's actually the fatted calf. A word about the brother. You see, we are actually represented in all three parts of this story. All three of the characters, that's all of us. And we all, sometime or another, have been that elder brother who resents that other people are not doing it right and they seem to be okay. That does not seem right. I'm doing it right. Where is my reward? Where's my goat? So it's a real quick test for your own elder brother syndrome is resentment, a sense of self-righteousness, and it doesn't serve. The coming home. Returning to your true nature as a child of God. The freedom that accompanies knowing that you have been given all that you need to live the life you were called to live. It's like you can exhale. You can trust that it's going to be okay, and it is okay. Ernest Holmes did a beautiful essay on this parable years ago. And this is what he said about the very end of the story. But to bring this story down to our own experience, it is a lesson for everyone for all time. We live in the midst of eternal good, but it can only be to us what we believe it to be. We are at the mouth of the river. We really must let our own buckets down if we wish them to be filled with the pure waters of reality. You see, the Father never judges, never blames, never criticizes, never withholds. The only thing that keeps us from the blessings of the Father is us. Our choice. Our choice to be driven by egoic thought and separation. To be driven by thoughts of comparison and not enough. That is our leaving home. So how do we return to the blessings of the Father? There's a Zen story I'd like to share with you briefly. Now, Zen, if you don't know much about Zen Buddhism, it is kind of the opposite of every faith that has sort of an elaborate system of prayers and costumes. It's not that at all. It seeks to find pure experience of the one through meditation and through practice. But there are teachings that offer insight. And there was a samurai who had heard that there was a great wisdom teacher, an old monk, and he sought to acquire the wisdom like he had acquired everything else by force. And so he came to this old teacher, and he said, "You, monk, teach me of heaven and hell." And the monk looked at him and said, You brutish thug, you ignorant savage, how could you ever hope to learn of anything of spiritual value? And the samurai was so enraged, he pulled the sword from his back, and he was prepared to strike the old monk down. And the monk looked him in the eye and said, "That is hell." And he fell to his knees and dropped his sword, and he wept in gratitude because he realized that this old teacher was offering to give his own life, trying to reach him with his spiritual teaching. And as he was there weeping in gratitude, the monk put his hand upon his shoulder and said, "This is heaven." We all are given a choice. What do you choose today? I'm choosing heaven today. You can choose to believe that there is something or somebody that can keep you from your joy and your peace, or I'm choosing heaven today. You can choose to be in the thought of separation, and I'm not enough, and I'll never get what is mine, and I'm always going to be stuck right here. You can believe that, but that's your choice. Or you can choose heaven. I am walking the road. I'm going home to heaven right now. Oh, I'm choosing heaven. I'm going to choose heaven. Choosing heaven today. Sing it with me. I'm choosing peace today. I'm choosing peace today. I am walking the road to heaven right now, singing, I'm choosing peace today. How about some joy now? I'm choosing joy today. It is your choice. I'm choosing joy today. Oh, I am walking the road to heaven right now, singing, I'm choosing joy today. I'm choosing love. I'm choosing love today. I'm choosing love today. I am walking the road to heaven right now, singing, I'm choosing heaven, love. I'm choosing love today. Right now I'm choosing love today. I am walking the road to heaven right now, singing, I'm choosing love today. Choosing heaven. I'm choosing heaven today. Right now I'm choosing heaven today. I am walking the road to heaven right now. Oh, I'm choosing heaven today.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.